Hello guys, so in the previous video we have discussed about promises, what are promises, what are their use cases, and we have seen an easy demonstration about explaining how they work. Okay, so in this video we are going to go a bit advanced and we're going to see how we can solve some problems, some errors with the promises, how we can pass arguments inside those promises, how we can chain them, and some little things. Okay, so let's get started. So the very first thing that I want to tell you guys about the states of the promise. Okay, a promise can be in three states: resolve, reject, and the third one is the pending state. Pending state is when a promise is waiting to be resolved or rejected. Okay, it's the third state. The second thing that I want to tell you guys is that you can either call resolve or reject at a time. Okay, you can't call both of them at the same time. Just for the demonstration, I'm gonna call resolve here, passing some argument, let's say resolved. Okay, and if I try to run it, it's not gonna work. Okay, so see, it comes here, it sees reject, and then it goes here, it won't come back here. Okay, and one more thing that I want to tell you is that you can't even change the value of, like if you have changed your mind and you want to now return some other thing from the same method, you can't do that either. Okay, like if you say some other error occurred. Okay, so if I try to run it, see, the first one is being called and then it goes here, it never come back here. So it's like when it sees a resolve or reject, it just goes here and the promise is being settled. It's not gonna go back there. Okay, talking about the argument passing inside the promises, why do we need to pass arguments inside the promises? I told you guys that a promise is used when we have a lot of asynchronous code in our program and we want to handle those asynchronous calls. Okay, asynchronous calls like database calls or fetching data from the URL. Okay, so to make that database call, like you want to fetch the data of a user, then you need to pass some user ID for which you want to fetch data, right? Or if you want to fetch data from the URL, you need that URL to be passed inside the promise. Okay, that's why we need arguments inside the promise. So let's see an easy demonstration about how we can pass arguments inside the promise. Okay, so I'm just gonna comment all these. Okay, I'm gonna make a new variable here, let's name it as add, and I'm gonna make it equal to a function, and I'm gonna use again an animal function syntax. Okay, so let's just pass two arguments inside it, a and b, and as we want to use the promise, we have to return new promise. And again, this promise constructor, it takes a callback function as an argument with two parameters, resolve and reject. Okay, so again, on behalf of some conditions, we are gonna resolve or reject the method, resolve or reject the promise. Let's say some error occurred, resolve. So what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna return the sum of all the variables here, and just for the condition, let's say if a is not equals to b, then we're gonna resolve the method. Okay, otherwise we're gonna reject it. Now we can call this method, let's call it with two arguments, let's say 10 and 20. Now as we know, from this method, this function, what we will be returning, we are returning a promise. Okay, we are returning a promise. So what we can do, we can call then method on this. Okay, so and again the same syntax, we have to pass two callback function, one for the success case and one for the failure case. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, the same thing inside this. Okay, I'm gonna just print it out, whatever is coming from the above. Okay, and inside this, inside the success case, whatever is coming, like the a plus b is coming, the sum of the two variables is coming. So I'm just gonna log it out on screen with result this. Okay, so let's try to run it and see what happens. Let's see how result column 30 printed on the screen. Okay, so we called add with 10 and 20 as an argument. It comes here, it goes inside it, it sees a is not equals to b. It called the resolve method, passing a plus b means 30. Okay, so it returned the promise. So here we have the promise. Okay, so we call then method on it, and it comes here because it's the request is coming from the resolve. Okay, so it comes here and printed result colon res, whatever is coming from the website, 10 plus 20 30. So it printed on the screen. Now let's see if I try to pass here a equals to b means 10 and 10, what happened. See, now the condition, this condition is false, and so it goes here, reject is being called, and then it comes here and printed whatever is coming from above. Okay, now let's talk about promise chaining and see how we can handle errors in promises. Okay, so promise chaining is like when you want to execute multiple promises in sequence, like you want to execute the second promise right after the one finishes, and then the third promise when the second one finishes. Okay, for example, you want to make a call to the database and make a call to the URL and fetch some data, and then when the data is been fetched, you want to store the data into database. So we can do that by promise chaining, right? Making first call to the URL and then the second call to the database. Okay, now let's try to understand it with an example. Okay, so the very first thing that we should do to chain the promise, we have to return a promise from here. Okay, so we can return a new promise from here. What we can do, you know that this method, it is also returning a promise, so we can just make a call to this method, right? Passing two arguments inside it, 20 plus 30, and now this method, it is also returning a promise for the success case, obviously. So we can call then method on it and pass two callback functions, right? One for the success case and one for the failure case. Okay, and for the failure case, I'm just gonna log whatever message is coming from the website. Okay, and for the result case, I'm gonna print result is plus rs. Okay, so let's try to run it and see what happens. So as expected, result is 30 for the first call, successfully executed, result is 30 printed on the screen. Then the promise, the second promise is returned from this call, and then it comes here, it sees again the promise has been successfully executed, so it printed result is 20 plus 30. But there is a problem in this code. So if I try to revert it back and induce an error in the first call and run it, so the first line is as expected, but the result is undefined. It is totally unexpected. Why? Because we have induced error in the first call. So it goes here 10 equals to 10, so it called reject method, it comes here and printed the sum error occurred on the first line, right? But in the second line, result is undefined. It's because when it comes out of this then method, it thinks like all the errors that were with the promise, they have already been managed by this error callback, right? So it doesn't go for the another checking, and instead of checking other things, it just call the success callback, right? That's why result is undefined, is because result is undefined in this block, right? So this is the problem, and we have a solution for this. The first thing we have to do, we have to remove all the error callbacks from then methods. Okay, and then we have a whole new method that is called as catch. Okay, so this catch method, it will handle all the errors coming from the first, second, or any of the call. Okay, so this catch method, it also takes one argument. Okay, it's the callback function that we want to execute when some error occurs. Okay, so I'm just gonna something is not right. Okay, so I'm just gonna print something is not right on the screen when there is an error in the program, right? So yeah, let's try to run it and see now what happens. So now in the first case we have got an error. So instead of going into the second block, it comes here, catches the error, and printed something is not right on the screen. And if I try to induce error in the second call, it's gonna work for that too. Okay, so the first call, it is gonna execute as expected, okay, because there is no error in this call, right? But when it comes here, it sees an error, right? That's why it comes here instead of going there. Okay, so this is how we handle the errors in promises. So in this video we have talked about the states of the promises, how we can pass arguments inside promises, how we can chain them, and how we can handle errors. Okay, in the previous video we have seen what are promises, how they are useful, and how they work, and we have seen an easy demonstration explaining how they work. So that's all for this video, and we'll see you guys in the next tutorials. Okay, see you then. Ta-da!